Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the IRCGN, the Central Ballistics Lab of the French Gendarmerie, taking a look at some of the particularly interesting small arms they have in their reference collection. And today, we are taking a look at a really cool piece. This is a second pattern of Russian AK-12. So the AK-12 is an interesting one to research because it's actually gone through several very significantly different iterations. This is a project that was developed for the Russian Ratnik program. This is a program that ran from about 2012 to about 2018 to modernize and replace most of Russia's small arms inventory. This side of it was intended to replace the standard AK-74 with something a little more modern. Of course, by the 2010s, optics are becoming a very common thing. There's really no good way to put optics on the AK-74. Yes, there's the side rail on it. That was developed for night vision scopes, and it's not really ideal for modern small arms optics. And there were other improvements that the Russians wanted to be able to make to the AK-74. So they institute this program to find new replacements. Now, Izmash develops the AK-12 initially. Now, the initial development of the AK-12 was done by a designer by the name of Zlobin. And as he developed it from 2011 until 2015, it was a fundamentally different rifle than what we see here. It was really more of a departure from the standard Kalashnikov system. The problem was it just didn't prove reliable, and it went through major revisions in 2012 and in 2013, and finally in 2015, they just replaced the lead designer entirely with a guy named, I'm going to screw this up, Uzemtsov. Sorry, my Russian is non-existent. At any rate, they replaced the designer, and they go back to the drawing board and essentially just take the AK-100 series, which is an AK-74 with some modernized furniture. They use that as the starting point, and they retain a lot of the classic AK elements. The receiver, the fire control group, the mechanism is largely kept the same, and then they use that as the basis for modernization. So finally, in 2016, there's a series of field trials. There are, at this point, 4 rifles under firm consideration by the Russian military. They are the AK-12 and the AK-15, both by Izmash or by Kalashnikov concern. The AK-12 is the modernized 100 series in 5.45, and the AK-15 is essentially the same gun in 7.62 by 39. There's still this question of which cartridge is actually going to be better for the Russian military, and they're considering both. They're also considering a pair of balanced recoil systems that rifles that date back to like the A545 platform, the AE971 platform. This balanced recoil concept is also under consideration. They have a 7.62 and a 5.45 version of that rifle as well. And in late 2016, they institute a set of field trials with 30 of each of these rifles. And then trials take about 6 months to run. And by the middle of 2017, they come to a conclusion, which is, we're going to adopt all 4 of these guns. However, there's kind of only 2 that really see use, and that is the AK-12 in 5.45 for the Russian Army, the standard infantry service, and then the balanced recoil gun in 5.45 for special forces, for Spetsnaz. The idea, what they find in trials, is that this guy, the AK-12, is actually the more accurate of the 2 platforms. However, at close range, the balanced recoil system's 2-round, it has a 2-round burst, not quite the same as an AN-94's burst, but a balanced recoil 2-round burst gives better effectiveness at close range. Once you hit about 300 meters, the better intrinsic accuracy of this platform makes it the better rifle, and this is also a significantly simpler rifle. I have a video on Kalashnikov Concern's balanced recoil system. If you want to take a look at that, I'll link to it down in the description. It's a mechanically cool idea. It's got some practical value, but it's also a quite complex system, and there are really serious questions as to whether it would actually be viable in an infantry rifle. And at any rate, the Russian army decides that it is not, and they adopt what is essentially a modernized AK-100, aka a modernized AK-74 to replace the AK-74. It's the AK-12. Now, this is actually a second iteration, a second model of the AK-12. So the first batch are ordered in 2019. They order, I think, 150,000 new AK-12 rifles to be delivered by 2022. In 2020, they actually make a number of improvements to the system, and that is what we have here, the second generation of the rifle. So, with that aside, let's go ahead and take a closer look, and let me show you what this changes, because we often think of a modernized AK as being just a regular AK with Magpul furniture stuck on it. This actually makes a number of non-trivial improvements to the system, and I think it's easy to argue that this is definitely an improvement over the original AK-74. All right, we actually have quite a lot of elements. Basically everything on this rifle has been improved or changed, mostly improved actually, over the original AK-74. And we'll just start with the magazine. They are now issuing still a 30-round magazine, 5.45 caliber, so it's the same 5.45 by 39 as the AK-74. The magazine now has visible witness holes in it, so you can actually see how much ammunition is in place. This will take all standard pre-existing AK-74 mags, though. So at the front here, we have a very new muzzle brake design, and this is quick detach. So there's a little pin right here. If I push that in, there we go, I can then rotate the muzzle brake off. That's what the actual muzzle of the rifle looks like. We have a block here that will hold the muzzle device in place, also holds the bayonet lug. Muzzle device has a little bit of a flash hider at the front. Otherwise, hollow inside gives you a little bit of a chamber in here. Again, this is similar to the AK-74, but I presume more effective. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen any real studies on the effectiveness of this as a flash suppressor, but that's what you've got there. Where the original AKM and AK-74 used a separate gas block and front sight block, the AK-12 combines the two, and this is certainly not novel to the AK-12. This had been done on a number of other systems, especially the somewhat shortened, like the 12.5-inch AK-100 series, but they've done it again here as a way to simplify the system, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially given that they are switching from a rear tangent sight to a rear aperture sight, which we'll take a look at in just a moment, but that allows you to expand the sight radius and make up for the fact that you're moving the front sight back. So the front sight itself basically remains the same type. It's a round pin, screw adjustable up and down for elevation, and then this rear drum that it sits in can be adjusted left and right for windage. We have a front sling swivel here that pivots from side to side. The gas tube is no longer removable, so instead, in order to be able to clean the gas tube, they've made the front of the gas system a removable plug. Once again, there is a little pin for removal, and if I push this pin all the way in, I can then rotate the gas plug, pull it out. There's a bit of grease on this gun, but that opens up the front of the gas tube so that you can clean it. All right, let's move back to the receiver here. We have fundamentally still a Kalashnikov style receiver. That hasn't been changed. The selector lever has this big finger tab added to it. Again, this isn't novel to the AK-12. It is an adoption of a system that had been added by a variety of other people before, but it does definitely make sense. This gives a right-handed shooter a nice finger hold to adjust, to engage or disengage the safety without having to remove their grip, their firing grip on the gun. What is interesting here is we now have a 4-position safety. So this is safe. This is semi-auto. We then have 2-round burst. And in fact, if that is empty. You can see hammer falls there. That's shot 1, shot 2, and then it locks open again. And you can actually hear 3 clicks of the trigger resetting. That burst system does reset itself. So if I only fire 1 round of a 2-round burst, cycle the rifle, it does lock open, and the next time I fire a 2-round burst, we get round 1, round 2, and then it locks open. Anyway, if you don't want burst, you can go all the way down, and that is actual unlimited full auto. Speaking of improvements, this has an enlarged charging handle, but I believe this is actually an aftermarket add-on. You can see it's held in place just by a big set screw here and fits on a standard AK handle. So I don't believe that that is actually part of the factory configuration of the AK-12. If we take a look at the markings here, we have the Ishevsk arsenal mark, and then this is 545 by 39, and the Russian designation for the AK-12 is 6P70, right there. The pistol grip is a new polymer assembly that integrates the trigger guard and basically half of the magazine catch assembly. There is a button here that releases the storage compartment inside, which is kind of cool. That locks into the pistol grip, and that holds a set of tools. So you have a pin punch, you have a screwdriver that includes a sight adjustment tool, and then you have two attachments for your cleaning rod. And then there is space for one other element here, which I suspect is a spare firing pin, but I'm not sure, and there's nothing in this particular one. It is interesting that the release button for that stowage compartment is ambidextrous here. Engages from either side. It's actually a fair amount of effort put into that control. Normally you would expect to see something like this held in place by some sort of just simple little flat spring on the base of the pistol grip, but they did a much more sophisticated system there. Now the sighting system and top cover are substantially changed from the original AK-74. There is no side rail on the receiver. Instead, you have Picatinny rail on the top of the rifle, and we no longer have a cross pin holding this in. You can see that there's, normally with an AK-74, you would expect to see the recoil spring guide sticking out the back here, locking the top cover in place. Well, now that this has integrated iron sights in it, by the way, in the form of an 800 meter rear aperture sight, push that down, rotate to your position of choice, and then just to show you up a little more close here, the rear sight. This is actually very much like an FG-42 or Johnson rifle style. So that's your battle sight 0. In order to change it, you push the sight down, rotate to whatever fixed position you want, 100, 300, all the way out to 800. 800, of course, is quite high to give you the drop for an 800 meter shot with 545. This particular rear sight has come loose, but there's a little screw here that locks it down that I think just needs to be tightened. The top cover itself is rock solid, and they do that by having changed up the way that it actually attaches. So we have a locking tab here at the front. Lift that, and we can pull this pin out, and then the top cover slides backwards and off the gun. You can see we have two little hooks back here. Those lock onto this cross pin that is reinforced onto the top cover by this assembly. Note that we also have this little flat spring back here, and if you look closely, you can see that the cross pin on the dust cover has oblong holes that it sits in. So this pin is able to move backward slightly. This pushes it, when you lock it in place, it pushes back against that flat spring, which puts a constant tension on it, so that even if the front mounting hole starts to wear, this will get pushed back into the same position, should be pretty repeatably every time. They've definitely put a fair amount of thought into how to make the top cover a stable optics mount without having to totally redesign the whole rest of the gun. And then the locking pin in the front, right here, holds it all in place. So way more solid of a mount than the original AK style top cover, because of course the original AK top cover was just a top cover. It wasn't intended to be a repeatable precision mount for optics. So this finally updates the design to acknowledge that use. Because the recoil spring is no longer being used to hold the top cover in, the locking system here, the attachment system for it is a bit different. What we do now is lift it up like so, and then I can pull it out. And then the rest of the recoil spring is essentially the same as the original AK spring, just a different locking mechanism at the back. We can then pull out the bolt and bolt carrier, which are also fundamentally the same as a standard AK. The bolt is also basically the same, 545 by 39. Really nothing has changed on this. See, we kind of skipped the stock. So the stock is a side folder. Push in the button and you can fold it in to the side. Has a rubber butt plate built onto it. To unlock it and open it back up, you push down on this lever. That allows the stock to fold back open. And then it snaps in place. It is a nice tight lockup on a gun. Even one that's got some wear on it like this is still a nice solid stock lockup. And then the stock is extendable by pushing this tab in, and you've got a nice wide range of length to accommodate pretty much anyone who might be using it. The handguard is substantially different from the original AKs as well. The gas tube is no longer removable. So to remove the handguard, we actually have to take out this pin. There's a hole here that allows me to push in a retaining spring. I can then push this pin through. There we go. That pin comes out. Then the handguard slides forward. The upper handguard is dovetailed into the lower. There we go. All right, there's our lower handguard with a metal heat shield in it. There's how it locks in place. And here's this spring steel tab. So when I push this all the way up, that lifts it up. Normally that tab sits in the center of that pin right there. And then the upper handguard is just a piece of plastic, and it is spring clamped on. There we go. So no heat shield in there, just plastic clamping onto the top. So this is definitely not going to hold zero. The dust cover rail will hold zero. This thing, not even remotely a chance of it. So this would be usable for mounting an illuminator, but I would not want to put any sort of aiming device on that rail. And then we can see the gas tube and the barrel uncovered. The gas tube, again, is fixed permanently in place. The barrel, this, I assume, is a cutout for like a GP25 or GP30 underbarrel grenade launcher that you would be able to attach here. Basically the same concept as the US M4 barrel cut, but hides, basically, you kind of don't notice that under the handguard when the handguard's installed. If we take a closer look inside the fire control mechanism here, there are more bits than you would expect in a regular AK-74, and that's because of that 2-round burst function. But other than that, it is fundamentally the same as the regular AK system. All right, and there you have a field-stripped second pattern AK-12. There has been a further improvement and modernization and update to the AK-12 system, and that would be the AK-12 M1 introduced in 2023. That was derived from a short-barreled Spetsnaz-specific version called the AK-12 SP. It has an improved safety, like an ambidextrous safety selector system. I don't have one of those to show you, but perhaps at some point I will get my hands on one, and if I do, I will certainly bring it here and film it for you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. This is a very rare chance to take a look at a really quite difficult for us to find current issue Russian rifle. So big thanks to the French Gendarmerie for giving me access to this to film for you guys. Thanks very much for watching.